This is Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think and it helps me out with the algorithm. But today I wanted to talk more about my mama Venus. Why? Because she's been up to a lot of things. She's stationed retrograde back July 22nd, and she's about to station direct September 3rd in just a few days. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to do what former Vice President Spiro Agnew called an agonizing reappraisal of the whole scene. It means let's look at how Venus retrograde went, okay? But first, what does Venus mean in astrology? She's my mama, and she's Our Lady of beauty, of love, of pleasure, of art and music. Relationships. When she moves retrograde, that means she appears to move backwards. Watch my other videos about what retrogrades are. We know that she doesn't really move backwards. It's apparent motion. But when Venus does go retrograde, it often spurs reversals in fortune in the areas of life that she has to do with, right? So again, aesthetics and beauty and love and relationships and all that fun sort of stuff. She can also signify delays when she's retrograde. So all that stuff just slows down. Sometimes you have to go back and readdress stuff that was left undone. I'll give you some examples later. Also, exes or old relationships seem to pop back up sometimes. Or you could meet new people, but it's often not what you expected. That could be a good thing, or that could be a not so good thing. And we've got some stories we're going to share with you. So we're going to talk briefly about Venus going direct, and then we're going to share your Venus retrograde stories. I picked like 9 or 10 or so out of all the submissions that you people sent me. So, well, anyway, okay. The other things that we often see with Venus retrograde are issues to do with women's rights, with trans and or gay rights. Also, we see arts and culture. We'll see reversals and developments. And then we have, with women's rights, we have the unconventional femininity that we see represented in the queer community oftentimes. Well, anyway, let's dig into it because first we need to talk about what the Venus cycle even is. And we know that Demetra George, one of my heroes, she's told us in the past how the Venus cycle symbolically represents a narrative about human development. And we see that same narrative reflected in the ancient Sumerian myth about my mama Inanna, right? Inanna is the prototypical Venus. She was Venus before the V word was. And Inanna's descent into the underworld. So first we start with the superior conjunction of Venus, right? That's when the Sun and Venus are conjunct, but Venus is direct, yes? We think of this as her ideal state following her marriage, right? This is Venus in her pure ignorance and bliss. Well, then we get to her in her evening star phase, where she's the goddess of earth and pleasure. Her attention is grasped by the material world and by others, right? Then we get to her maximum elongation in the east. This is me, my phase that I was born at. This is where she's brightest in her full beauty and glory. Oftentimes, this is also her full indulgence and licentiousness, right? So having too much fun, that's me. And then we approach her retrograde station and her evening set. This is sort of like the descent. It's the rude awakening. In the story, this is where Inanna contemplates death. It's the beginning of her descent into the underworld. Go, mama, go. Okay. We then get to the inferior conjunction, which we recently had. I think it was August 13th. which is sort of like her hitting rock bottom, isn't it? Like, you know, in the story, sort of like the retrograde cycle part as Venus is descending into the underworld. Her sister, who's the queen of the underworld, I think Ereshkigal. Anyway, the queen of the underworld makes her remove a piece of her. She has 7 ornaments or 7 symbolic, powerful jewels that she has to remove on her way down. So when she hits rock bottom at the inferior conjunction, it's like she's totally naked. She's stripped of pretense and power and material glory. When we approach where we are now, the direct station, Venus emerges in her morning star phase, right? Rising before the sun. This is Venus reborn as the warrior goddess. She's independent here, and she's triumphant, right? She's clawed her way. Well, then we get to the maximum elongation. That's Venus's furthest distance from the sun, this time towards the west. And this is sort of like maximum badassness for Venus, right? This is where she's in her full triumphant glory, her full independent glory, where she doesn't, you know, I don't need anyone. Well, and then she approaches her morning set. And this is where she begins to long for connection again, where she doesn't want to be alone anymore. Maybe she gets online and, you know, just browses Tinder. I'm just seeing what there is. I just want to see, you know. Anyway. And then we hit the superior conjunction and we start all over again, right? So like we said, here we are at the direct station. Venus will once again appear as the morning star as she separates from the sun. She's not visible within 15 degrees either way of the sun. So as they separate, then we can see her again. And she rises early in the morning sky, just before the sun. We call that the morning star. So people born under this phase tend to be more independent, right? Like my warrior mama. But they're still reserved and cautious because this is the phase where Venus has clawed her way, or Inanna, my mama, has clawed her way out of the bowels of hell. And she did it herself, by herself, with no one else, right? And thus these people get sort of known as solitary loners or just straight up independent. You don't have to be solitary to be, you know, a very self-directed type person, do you? So, you know, if these people like you, give them some space and encourage them in the things that they're passionate about. So what happened in the world during Venus retrograde? Well, remember, we often see things to do with women's rights and reproductive rights in particular. And then we'll also see things with unconventional femininity having to do with trans rights and queer rights and even sometimes gay marriage. And then, of course, arts and culture and aesthetics and beauty. So in terms of reproductive rights, during Venus retrograde, the state of Ohio had a vote, had a special election on something that was called Issue 1, which was basically an initiative that would make it so that in order to change the Ohio state constitution, you'd need a 60% majority rather than the 50% that they currently need, right? The whole idea was put forth by the Ohio Republican Party in order to try and defeat a measure to codify reproductive rights in the Ohio state constitution. So if you needed 60%, it would make it a lot harder to pass that in order to put reproductive rights as an actual right in the state of Ohio. But people were a lot smarter than that. People realized what was going on, and they went out and voted in droves and defeated Issue 1, which was basically a clear affirmation that Ohioans wanted reproductive rights not to be infringed. So, excuse me. Now, the state of Indiana didn't do as well. After a year-long fight, according to NPR, they basically suffered a near total abortion ban, except in very extreme cases. So you see how this goes both ways. In terms of trans rights, according to the Associated Press, a judge ruled against Texas's ban on gender-affirming care. Well, simultaneously, a judge in Missouri allowed a similar ban. So people got confused, like, what do we do? You know? Because trans youth had been going to other states, I believe, to get care. So anyway, so this is getting more and more difficult. The families of transgender youth have filed multiple lawsuits to stop the bans. And of course, conservative judges keep making up bullshit and lies to keep this nonsense going. You know, it's hurting children and hurting their families. There's going to be a hearing on September 1st in front of the 6th Circuit Court about all this, so we'll see what happens, but I'm not very optimistic. Trans rights have been under attack in the United States in order to give conservatives a wedge issue to get votes, because they don't have anything when it comes to the economy. They don't have anything when it comes to inflation, and they don't have anything when it comes to climate change. So they have to make up issues about trans people. Anyway, well, how about arts and culture? So, the Barbie movie, which is so, it represents, to me, it represents a climax in culture because it is itself indicative of the story of Inanna, as Demetra George kind of shows us. And it represents a resurgence. I mean, it's very much sort of like an affluent, you know, white women phenomena. But still, it does represent sort of a resurgence of female awareness. You know, there was sort of the phenomenon of women sort of asserting themselves after the Barbie movie came out. And then a lot of conservative outlets and angry men had a backlash against it. Those uppity women and da-da-da-da-da-da. Right? Like, yo, chill out, dude. Gosh. Everything's threatening, isn't it? Anyway, so, and then Kid Rock, reversal, right? Got caught drinking a Bud Light after he shot up a bunch of them with an automatic weapon, right? So, there's a reversal. Cognitive dissonance. Also, that goofy song, Richmond from Richmond, or whatever, Richmond. I mean, it's goofy because it doesn't really mean what they think it means. I mean, it supposes to be an anthem for the working class, and then goes against the working class in its lyrics, you know, wanting to get rid of welfare and give tax breaks to the wealthy and stuff like that. So it's cognitive dissonance in that song, you see, which to me is very indicative of the Venus retrograde. Oh, and then another funny thing that happened, the upcoming film Dune, which was a famous sci-fi novel series, but Dune Part 2 was delayed till next year. So this is very classic with Venus retrograde, delaying art, delaying culture, right? I'm not saying that Dune is like the pinnacle of Western culture, but, you know, I don't know. Some of you might think so. Who knows? Well, what else happened? We had the SAG strike, the Screen Actors Guild. Now, big Hollywood stars started getting involved with the Screen Actors Guild strike around Venus's shadow period. I want to say like July 17th, so just a few days before she's stationed. So I think that's quite interesting and representative of the Venus retrograde phenomenon. You see? But then the strike intensified, didn't it? And we've seen all sorts of nasty comments from studio executives and stuff, threatening people, you know. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but Matt Damon also came out to explain why the strike was so important. I think he did a wonderful job. But then he came out later admitting to using slurs, homophobic slurs and stuff like that. And I'm like, no one was asking, dude. You know, but I guess being honest is fine. I mean, when I was young, I said horrible things, being closet and all that sort of stuff. So we live and we learn and we get over it. And it's good to atone and be accountable. But it's like, no one asked, homie. Like, anyway. So what happened to me during Venus retrograde? I'm just going to say really quick because you probably don't care. But I was so excited about Venus retrograde. Well, I was so excited about Venus being in Leo because it's my 7th house. Now, I knew Venus was going to be retrograde, and that's why she would be in Leo so long, right? I just wasn't expecting all the bullshit that happened. All the stuff that happened. I was so excited because Venus was Leo's my 7th house. And I took 2 years away from dating and relationships for my transition, right? And then I became comfortable again. So I started dating again, like right around Venus's shadow period, right before, which started on June 19th. So, and I met someone literally that day. I thought it was going well. I thought we were doing well. I thought it was going great. But then she dumped me like a week before the inferior conjunction. So to me, it was quite fitting, you know, and it's better that it happened before the inferior conjunction, quite honestly. So it's just kind of funny to me because I got separated from my marriage during the Venus retrograde in 2018. And then what else happened? There's some other interesting ones. Oh, my first long-term girlfriend broke up with me when Venus stationed retrograde in 2004. We had been together for 4 years. And then the next year, 2005, when Venus stationed retrograde, I got my first astrology reading. So that's quite interesting too. 2005. Anyway, I also had surgery on my nose. Part of it was breathing, part of it was the aesthetic. But my mom and brother came to town to help take care of me while I was healing. Well, that was supposed to be for 10 days. As soon as they were about to leave, again, they had a dog with them. I didn't include that in the story. My dog, Maggie, was my brother's service dog. So they had her when they came to visit me. And then they tried to bring her back with them. She was 18 years old. And the airlines wouldn't let them. So we took her to the vet while they were here. And the vet told us that she had lymphoma. And that our best bet to do would be to put her down. So, on the inferior conjunction, we put my dog Maggie down. 18 years old. My ex and I had adopted her back in the inferior conjunction in 2010. So it really, really sucked. They ended up being here for another 20 days after that. So this is like a month long. Venus retrograde is delays, isn't it? And very unpleasant delays when you have family in a very small apartment, creating friction on each other, you know? So like I said, we took my dog to the vet. They advised us to put her down. We adopted her in 2010 at the inferior conjunction, and we put her down in 2023 at the inferior conjunction. So that's 13 years. And she was 18 years old. We did the whole thing at home. Like, we had a home care person come out. And then my brother and I sat with her as she passed. We put our faces next to her face. And we could feel when her breathing stopped. We could feel when her breathing stopped. Oh, I'm going to ruin my makeup. Oh, God. Oh. Oh, jeez. It was really hard. It was really hard. So, anyway. God. God. Keep it together. Keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. Keep it together, keep it together. Also, excuse me, more positive. I met someone I think I like, so I'm excited about that, and we'll see. I just matured a little bit. I know not to get my hopes up too much, so. But she seems really cool. So what happened to you during Venus retrograde? Well, I've got some of your stories here. Let's go ahead and get into them. So these are stories that you sent me. I'm going to go ahead and read them. And now I've got eyeliner and mascara streaming all over. But let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Okay, number 1. From a dear friend and listener, viewer, whatever the hell we want to call them. Fan. Venus retro started out lovely for me. I thought it was improving my relationship. I'm married to an addict who's been really struggling the past 3 years, and I've been on the receiving end of all of the trauma. So Venus retro hit, and suddenly they were committed to recovery in a way I've never seen, and things had really gotten better between us. But then they admitted to cheating multiple times, on top of all of the using and all of the other lies. And that was a huge shift in my thinking the moment I found out. We've been dealing with homelessness and couch surfing because my partner's addiction, and that alone was enough that I started making moves behind the scenes to get me and my kids in a more stable situation. We haven't gotten there yet. As of right now, my partner is doing everything you'd want someone to do in this situation, but I'm entirely checked out and can't even fathom a life where we stay married. I'm completely aware of my worth and what I want in a way I've never experienced, and I'm not willing to settle anymore. South Node Libra, done with these patterns. I can feel it in my bones. So you see, someone's having a decisive break here. It's a reversal of a situation that's been going on, but in this reversal, there's moments of clarity. Well, let's go to the next one. Okay, number 2. During the shadow period, I broke my neck and was having serious relationship problems with my boyfriend. He broke up with me on July 20th because I was being crazy? Scorpio moon guilty? Well, we don't have to judge ourselves like that necessarily, but anyway. Venus stationed retrograde at the same degree that I have Venus and Leo in my birth chart. In my natal chart, my Venus is squared with my moon. I have that too. And and Pluto in Scorpio. I noticed that my Venus in Leo was in retrograde during the summer of 2015. Oh, you noticed that Venus in Leo was retrograde during summer of 2015. Yes. That was 8 years ago, the 8-year Venus cycle. And during that summer, I had a serious breakup with my daughter's dad that ended in domestic violence. And that summer actually shook up the last 8 years since then. So that's the 8-year Venus cycle from 2015 to 2013. So this is quite interesting. I started pulling myself out of a hole I've made since 2015. And during this retrograde, I feel like I finally learned whatever lesson I was prompted to learn back then. This is a great story. It's been a really crazy summer, but I've honestly never felt this stable emotionally in my entire life. So much has changed for me. I'm a Virgo sun with Mars in Libra, so there's a lot of planets in my natal chart being triggered right now, which I think is having some big effect. I started meditating every day and journaling, mindfulness techniques, basically anything that can help since July 23rd. So right after Venus went retrograde. Rather than let thoughts and emotions be controlled for 29 years up to this point, which that's about a Saturn cycle, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on. That's a really great one, isn't it? Because it encompasses the 8-year greater Venus, what they call the petal cycle or star cycle, you know, where she traces the pentagram. I do that in my other video. Watch that video. Okay, next story. I think this is number 3. So they say, LOL. Not so much a story, but an overview perhaps. But for this Venus retrograde in Leo, it was my Venus return. It kind of made me reflect on my past situationships, whatever that means, situationships and relationships, because, of course, everybody seems to come back around during retrogrades. Well, sometimes. I honestly feel like it was supposed to be a way for me to reassess the nature of each of these interactions. It's hard to explain. I'm sure you can better than me. But it's like when you realize that your boundaries and standards weren't where they should have been. For instance, I cut people off I was casually dating because I felt that I didn't hold them to the standard at the beginning. I'm sorry, this is a hard sentence. I cut off the people I was casually dating because I felt that I didn't hold them to a standard at the beginning, and it would be impossible to expect it later. So I would just like to start over. Well, I mean, it's not a video game, is it? Jesus. But not immediately. I'd like to look the part, or at least feel like I look the part, you know? That's very Venus retrograde, trying to fake it till you make it. Many themes of self-worth and beauty, and what's considered beautiful, have been heavy lately. And the ways I've sought attention in the past. It's almost as if I hadn't been seeing clearly, and now I can see. I hide my talents. Well, you were hiding a lot, weren't you? Because I fear too much attention. Issues surrounding what I would like to be known for are conflicting. I also have Lilith in Leo conjunct my natal Venus and Moon, all in the 5th house. My daughter is a Leo also. Themes around my motherhood and being a better mom than the women before me. So it's ironic around this time I've decided to distance myself from my own mother. I had mother issues too, jeez. My daughter and I have been bonding really well, more than normal lately. And I really have been taking the steps to work on my parenting, while also living a life too, having a life too. An extremely strong urge to challenge patriarchal ideas and concepts lately as well. That's another thing too about Venus retrograde. One of my heroes, I mean, she's not a great hero, but I love Courtney Love. And she's like the quintessential Venus retrograde because she challenges conventional femininity, doesn't she? Because she's a pain in the ass. I am doll parts, bad skin, doll heart, right? Oh, I love playing that song. Anyway, I've been clashing with men and women who have a lot of these old beliefs. Anyway, so this is very characteristic of Venus retrograde. Now, let's go on to number 4 here. Story time! Started talking to my girlfriend the end of January. I probably should have paid attention to the planets then, but I got the googly eyes. Weird shit is happening. Wait, weird shit happening is just how my life has always been, lol. So at the very end of May, I slipped up on the L word in the middle of a heated discussion, LMAO. A few days, so the L word, everyone knows what that is, right? I think it's lesbian. Anyway. A few days later, on like the 31st, oh, the love word. I slipped up on the L word. Oh, so she said, I love you. Oh, a few days later, on like the 31st, she moved in with her sister-in-law, her kid's aunt. June 2nd, she tells me she's in love with me. Basically loved bombed the shit out of me. I wasn't expecting that at all. I've been through that. Felt kind of weird because she's very nonchalant. Red flag. Unless she wants to be emotional, which is never. I've been there more times than I care to admit. So I wasn't used to her being like that. Everything was all good. Things with us couldn't have been better. Amazing. I've been there too. It's mid-June, around the 24th or so. So that's Venus's shadow period. My gut says stalk her exes on Facebook. So my toxic ass does it immediately, of course. Boom, what do I see? A picture of my girlfriend's smiling face next to her ex. and her ex's mom at a restaurant. I called her boohoo crying like, what's up with this picture of you and a fake name here? She tells me it wasn't anything. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Okay, it wasn't you. Eddie Murphy does this wonderful bit about that. You know, it's so funny because we can see how gender roles aren't necessarily fixed. You know, we usually associate, anyway, people associate certain behavior with males and other behavior with females, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So she tells me it wasn't anything, just meeting and catching up, that she only saw her for a few times. I believed what she said because you're supposed to trust the person, right? And to be honest, yeah. Well, July comes and I get a phone call while I'm at work. It's her crying, please come get me. She comes home and we're all good. Now for the good stuff. A little over a week later, her ex sent the police to my house. And my girlfriend gets arrested for an old warrant. 2019. She should have already dealt with that. Well, come to find out, she was actually living with said ex. This basically happened to me at one point. So this is funny. I mean, it's not, it's awful. I'm so sorry. It's just, I relate. I identify with this. Well, she was living with said ex and they had a nasty breakup. Oh my God, this sounds like I'm reading something I've been through. Right before I went to pick her up, she warned me at the beginning that her ex is crazy. I was like, psh, we all have one of those. But she was not even making an understatement. This same ex has now been trying to press charges on her, while she's still in jail, mind you, for things that were bought for her during their most recent relationship. I'm finding out new stuff every day that I was lied to about. I'm so sorry. This is so crappy. This is so painful. I can't really ask too much or be as confrontational as I want to be over a recorded phone call. Oh yeah, she's in jail. I'm not the type of person to ghost when you're at your lowest. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be mad at you. So even though I'm finding out all this crazy shit happens behind my back, I still haven't broken up with her. Okay. I still haven't broken up with her. Meanwhile, I also currently have an ex who wants to work things out, but I'm terrified. Well, go try it out. You know? I mean, your girlfriend did, so it's only fair. I'm just chilling until the retrograde is over. Well, you got a couple days, so, you know, Sunday. Venus retrograde is over. Anyway, let's go on to the next story. That was a really painful one. I'm so sorry. That's awful. How are we doing on time? We're at 33 minutes. Let's keep going. Let's get through some more. These are kind of interesting. Okay, this is number 5. Hey, Saturn girl. Not sure if this is good enough for a Venus retrograde story, but here's my anonymous story. How many times can we say story? So the day before Venus actually stationed retrograde, I had a live YouTube video pop up on my phone about Venus retrograde, blah, 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 blah. As soon as I watched it, I mean the precise moment, I got a message. It was from a guy that I hadn't talked to in a little over than 2 years. To give the story context, we met over 10 years ago. He was a music producer, and I was somewhat a manager for some artists at that time. So we met in a work capacity. But as soon as we see each other in person, there was a very magnetic attraction that was noticeable to everyone. That created some problems because we were both with other people. But we never crossed the line in any way. Just business lunches and exchanges of advice. But he felt like he had to keep me at an extreme distance. So we spent years not really talking. Fast forward a few years, and I started getting into manifesting. Whatever that means. I've manifested an 8-ball. Here it is. And I decided I wanted to manifest. Well, maybe you can manifest some shit for me. My soulmate for marriage. I want to manifest someone. Anyway, well, let's see. I've been dating. I think someone's pretty cool. I don't know. We'll see. Fast forward. After a few months of this, guess who pops up in my dreams? Yeah, that guy. Right? Like it's Mary Tyler Moore. And it was very vivid. These were vivid dreams where it was like he was sending me messages. Watch out for that kind of stuff. When you fall into that trap of like, they're psychically contacting me with messages. You know, if you're absolutely convinced, cool. But just remember that can be the sort of stuff that makes us rationalize abuse as well. Okay. Felt almost telepathic. During the pandemic, I wished him a happy birthday, since he kept popping up in my dreams. And we decided to catch up since things had slowed down for both of us. The magnetic attraction was still there. So catching up led to a bunch of dates. Or lunch dates, I guess. That led to more. More being 2 red hot nights, right? And of course, the red hot nights appeared very vividly in my dreams a week before it all went down. But then he had to get back on the road for performances. At first, we still kept talking, but then the communication started to wane. Then he went totally cold for a few weeks. I felt like something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He messaged me a little after that to let me know that he was in a relationship. I was devastated. I tried my best to move on, but every single day I was reminded of him. He was in my dreams. I would hear or see his name. I would hear his favorite artists, etc. Every day for 2 years, I even tried to talk to someone else. And as we went to exchange numbers, the guy's song started blasting from the phone out of nowhere. Very crazy. It was like I was being haunted by the memory of him all the time. So back to Venus Retrograde. It had been over 2 years, and I wasn't expecting to hear from him at all. Before and following him on social media, he had wonderful pics of him with his new girlfriend, and they both looked very happy. As I said, I was trying hard to move on. So when I got the message from him right after I had that thought in my head, I actually jumped back a little out of being surprised. It started with light conversation, like, hey, how are you? What have you been up to? That's how it always starts. Then he starts a message saying, I know this is off the subject, and I never got to tell you this, but those nights we shared were effing amazing. You were amazing. They were very special to me. He went on to apologize about the timing of everything and explained how he ended up in a relationship with the other lady. He said he felt really bad about how everything affected me, and said he didn't feel right about the impression that it left on me, you, whatever. I was really shocked about the apology, and it was really out of the ordinary to have him share so much. So we have more conversation, and he tells me about his recent breakup. We catch up about other things over the next week. Then he starts suggesting we meet up. I was hesitant at first because everything just felt so out of the blue. But eventually I gave in. And you guessed it, another red hot night. I'm shocked. How surprising. So after that night, I left for a month-long tour the next day. Oh no, he left for a month-long tour the next day. Sorry, he left for a month-long tour. It's currently been about 3 weeks since we've seen each other. And it's been pretty much radio silent. They did have someone pass away that was on tour with them, so I sent condolences. And he did acknowledge that. But I can't help but wonder if this is some kind of karmic retrograde test that I failed. You can't think of it like that. It's not like, you know, you're human. It's not like an exam. Like, how abusive would that to be? Like, the universe is like, here's your pop quiz. You know, it is what it is, and we suffer the consequences, don't we? But anyway, also, I am a natal Leo Venus, 18 degrees. And Venus is my ruling and guiding planet. So maybe she's meaning it's the ruler of her ascendant. Plus, Venus retrograde has been square my Scorpio Mars, but sextile my... Anyway, la 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 la. But those are specific aspects for her. But that's quite an interesting... So you have someone pop back up only to ditch you again. I mean, that's very Venus retrograde in many ways, but, and it's painful, and it's, quite frankly, shitty how people can be. And I'm sorry about that. That's awful. You know, it's kind of interesting, though. Well, I won't get into all that, but I've shared enough personal stuff. Okay, now this is number 6. How are we doing on time? We're at 40 minutes. We'll do 2 more. I had 5 men. I had 5 men pop up that I casually dated. 2 old friends. 1 sex thing. I also had a work thing get revived that had fallen away in the spring. But the main story, things to know. I've been actively dating for 2 years. Over 2 years. I never date anyone longer than 3 weeks. It's an ongoing joke. I started talking to a man 3 days before the Venus retrograde. It was a struggle the entire time. We struggled to meet up. Things came up. We had to reschedule. We butted heads a little, both Aries suns. Despite that, we connected deeper than I have ever with anyone in a long time. It was good. It was deep. It was fun. It was a sexy connection. He lasted almost 5 weeks. Wow! That's a new record. We shared several planets. I mean, you know it's deep when you last 5 weeks, right? We share several planets and issues, like fear of abandonment. The second, we were emotionally intimate, shared with each other in person, climbed into each other's heads, both Scorpio moons. It took 6 days for us to stop talking. And unlike other men, I haven't gone back to dating. I'm waiting to see if we'll bounce back. Bounce back to each other after Venus goes direct. Or if we really did ruin something amazing. Because even though I was just looking for a good time when I met him, he feels like a partner to me. Like my partner. Because we get each other. Too bad we're damaged in the same ways. I'm sorry. I mean, when I started dating, I thought I just wanted to have fun and whatever, but after that first breakup, I realized I like having a person, a long-term thing. But I don't know, we'll see what happens. I don't know. We just, see, with Venus retrograde, we can't get too attached. You just have to be ready for whatever comes, and if it doesn't work, move the fuck on. No hard feelings, you know. I was really upset when my thing happened, but it wasn't anyone's fault, and I wasn't mad at anyone. I was just emotional because I got attached. You know, a lot of us, especially with Venus square the moon, for those of you who have it, we have an anxious attachment style frequently. Because when we fall in love, we start thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to find someone better. They're going to find someone smarter, cuter, better at astrology, you know? And we get paranoid. And it's hard for us to relax in relationships and be ourselves. So I hope you figure that out, because I finally realized that it was worth more to be myself than be with anyone else. You know what? We're getting along here. So this is the final story. Final story. It's the final countdown. Okay. Hi, Saturn girl. Sorry it took me so long to start writing this, but I got home late from work. Okay, so I've been involved with this man. We'll call him Anthony Scalia. Sorry, Antonin Scalia. On and off for 7 years. We are currently on. Even though he doesn't communicate with me for several weeks at a time. Well, there's your problem. You shouldn't have been on in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen and NBs, please. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. If someone doesn't talk to you for 3 weeks at a time, let alone 3 fucking days without some sort of notice or reason, you probably shouldn't be with them. If someone disappears and doesn't tell you, no, that is not healthy. That is not healthy. So anyway, I will now stop my judgments here. Okay. Several weeks at a time. When he first started doing this early in our relationship, I would text daily, as we tend to do. I would text people daily if I didn't feel like, oh my God, I'm like such a simp and I'm going to annoy the shit out of them. I would text daily to see if he was okay. And that's normal. Like, you want to know someone's okay, right? Like, I texted someone when they didn't respond for 2 days and I was like, yo, what happened? Oh, like the new Skyrim came out or something. So, I would text daily to see if he was okay. He would eventually respond. Things would continue until he did it again. Turned out he's an Aquarius Venus. That doesn't matter necessarily. You can be a good person and be an Aqua Venus. I mean, I got divorced from an Aqua Venus, but that's a whole nother story. I knew very, very wonderful Aqua Venuses who I'd been in love with, so. But I wasn't into astrology back then, Aqua Venus, so I had no idea. And it's not bad to be an Aqua Venus. Don't worry about that. Anyway, so the last time, what's bad is being an asshole. When someone doesn't talk to you for 3 weeks, it doesn't matter what their fucking Venus is. You gotta move on. Like, you don't want to talk? Bye, Felicia. Okay, so anyway, I'm not trying to judge. This is just, I'm saying this for myself, too. And it's not bad being an Aqua Venus. So the last time we saw each other, we live in different states, and he's a truck driver. We went to dinner, and he started talking to the guy at the next table. He told the other guy that he, Antonin Scalia, and I are friends with benefits. And friends with benefits. And I have never in my life been involved in a friends with benefits situation. Not that I think there's anything wrong with it, but it's not for me. Well, you weren't on the same page as he was, obviously. So I thought about it for several days afterwards and thought, if this is how he thinks of me, then we don't need to be together. I agree. Like, what an a-hole. Doing that right in front of you? The lion, the witch, and the audacity of this bitch. So anyway. Afterwards, So in my mind, we're done. This was early August. So we're in the midst of Venus Retrograde. Last week he texted me, of course. And we were just chatting. When I asked him about what he said, and he did something completely unexpected. Of course he did. Because they always do. I'm sorry if I sound cynical and jaded, but I've had my heart shattered more times than a vase. So, I'm sort of over it. He apologized for making me feel a certain way. What's a certain way? Shitty? Anyway, I love this story. Thank you. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I like this story. It's perfect for this. These have all been wonderful stories. He apologized to me for making me feel a certain way. I forgot to mention that we are and have been in a master-slave dynamic. So those of you who are into kink, a master-slave dynamic is a type of kink or BDSM, or I shouldn't say BDSM. BDSM is what you do, and DS, dominant submission, is more about who you are, your mind, how you express love and need to be loved. So a master-slave dynamic is a kink relationship. It can be a romantic relationship or not be a romantic relationship. But it is consensual, where two people enter into a consensual agreement and one voluntarily gives her power up to a master or whatever. And then it's the master's job to make decisions for them or whatever else they decide. I mean, it's always particular to that couple. But I just felt like I needed to explain that, you know, so you know what we're talking about here, because not everyone thinks in kink like me, right? So, and, okay. So, an MS dynamic, when you're involved in a kink dynamic, you can't have bullshit like, you can't have assholes that disappear for weeks at a time. That's not a master. I'm sorry, but it's not. That's not someone who's a dominant. That's not someone who's doing anything constructive in a relationship. I'm sorry. Anyway. MS dynamic, and he said, from now on, I'm his slave, which he has done in the past, but he probably forgot. So, of course, I turned to goo. There is so much more, but that's the gist of it. If you need me to include birth charts, you can. No, I don't need. This is plenty story. But I want to be very cautious here, because BDSM isn't for flakes. You see, kink is not for flaky fucking people. It's for people who need that sort of thing, who need certain types of relationships, and who do so with love, honesty, and respect for people. You can do all sorts of filthy, nasty things, as long as you're safe, sane, and what? Consensual. Consent is one of the most important things to me, and it should be to everyone. We can work on consent with our children. If they don't want to say I love you or give you a hug, that's their choice. When I was a kid, we were forced into that, weren't we? So anyway, I just want to say this for those of you who are involved in these sorts of power dynamics, or power exchange dynamics, rather, that you have to protect yourself. And you have to be very, very mindful of your own boundaries and hold yourself to them, and watch out for red flags. Like someone not calling you for weeks at a time? No. No. On what planet is that okay? If you guys agreed to that, wrote it down somewhere, hey, is this cool with you that I don't call you for 3 weeks at a time? Yeah, cool. Sweet. That's part of our dynamic. But most of this stuff I don't think was communicated. In a kink relationship, everything has to be communicated, because you have to be, everything has to be out on the table, because it needs to be safe. And blind spots, just like rock climbing, blind spots can result in injuries. Okay? Anyway, so we're coming up on an hour now. I think it's about time to call it quits here. But I think those were really interesting stories. I'm really ready for Venus to be direct. I'm ready to see my mommy in the morning as the morning star, heralding the glory and beauty of the day, rising before the sun. And when Venus goes direct, hopefully some of these wacky situations will work themselves out. Maybe not necessarily in a comfortable way, but things do come to light, revelations happen, and we come to terms with things. Well, I'm hoping in my situation things work out. You know. But anyway, thank you for watching till the end if you did. I was looking at analytics, and on average, people watch about 40% of my videos. So, but thank you for watching till the end. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share these things, okay? Share. And also, I do wonderful readings. Remember that. They're the best It's scientifically proven. They've done studies. And all my information is below for you to contact me for a reading. And once again, I love you. You're beautiful and have a spectacular whatever it is you're having. Okay?